Welcome to year 2 of the Funding Love podcast. I'm Mallory Elrod.
And I'm Caitlin Duckworth. We are two adoptive moms that seek to love, support, and elevate all corners of the adoption triad, including adopted families, adoptees, and birth parents.
We do that through honest conversation with both expert and everyday voices about all things adoption and more, all while running our nonprofit, Funding Love.
We create post-adoption experiences that strengthen bonds, build community, and restore people.
We are Funding Love,
the podcast.
Happy Thanksgiving week and welcome back to the Funding Love podcast. I'm your co-host Mal, and this week we have returning guest Ashley Mitchell. You probably know her as Big Tough Girl on Instagram. She is a birth mom and adoption reform advocate, and she is back talking about her own podcast, Twisted Sisterhood. In this conversation, we really deep dive in on that name, Twisted Sisterhood, and what it means not only for relationships between birth moms, but between all parts of the adoption constellation. Get ready for a passionate conversation about the real and raw realities of adoption experiences and the work that we still have left to do in reform and advocating for this community. Buckle up and let's get started. Well, welcome, Ashley. I cannot tell you how excited we are to have you back on episode 86 of the Funding Love podcast. Welcome.
86. That is amazing.
Yes,
I don't know
girl.
what the number was of my first appearance on this podcast, but this is like amazing. I'm like, okay, here we go. We're in it. We're in it. It's great. This is amazing.
We're in it, and we're not going anywhere. 86. I mean, I think that's a pretty solid number there.
I mean, we're committed.
Yes.
We're plot committed. It's great.
We're doing it. You know what? Consistency is key, and we are here for the consistency. So.
Yes.
But we are excited to have you on the show today because last time we had you tell a little bit of your story and the things that you advocate for. And this time we wanted to talk to you more about some other things that you are doing and what you're involved in. But you know what? Did you know this podcast is going to air on the week of Thanksgiving?
Oh.
So to break the ice a little bit and just like start a natural conversation here, why don't you tell us, Ashley, a get to know you question since we already got to know you on our previous episode. What is your favorite Thanksgiving dish that like you couldn't have Thanksgiving without?
Okay, listen. Okay. I know that this is a very unpopular opinion. And learning to cook has been something that's been so amazing for me over the last few years. It's been very trauma healing. It's been all of these things. But I'm telling you, if I don't have a boxed stovetop stuffing for my Thanksgiving dinner, then it's not Thanksgiving. And I know people are going to come at me like I'm prepared for it. And I make homemade crust, pie, mashed potatoes. I brine my turkey for a week. Like I am not trying to skim on homemade Thanksgiving, but I'm telling you, unless you
Nothing like it.
prove a recipe of homemade stuffing that's better than stovetop, then we have nothing to talk about. We have nothing to talk about.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. Yeah. My mom feels the same way, but she does like this trick of doing one box of one that has like breadcrumbs and then one that's the cornbread. And you mix them.
Well, and
so
you can also do like
swears by the mixing
yeah,
of
you
the
can do
two
like
different
semi-homemade.
boxes.
And
you can like
the
add
die-hard chicken stovetop stuffing, not turkey flavored stovetop stuffing.
Oh, okay.
We're getting feisty about it. But I'm telling you, if you can come at me with a recipe that matches, then why am I going to waste my time doing the breadcrumbs, doing this stuff if it's not equally as good as the box? I'm just saying.
And it's hard to match it. It's hard to match it.
Pretty good.
I hear you. No, I love that. Okay, so people will just have to email in their responses to that one.
I can't wait. I can't wait to get the lash. But so another fun fact is that you are a co-host of a podcast as well called
the podcast.
We're all crazy. Yes. And so yours is called the Twisted Sisterhood. So tell us like about the show and why you and your co-host decided to start the podcast, and tell us who your co-host is too, by the way.
Yes. Okay. So Kelsey Vandervliet Ranyard, fellow birth mom, we met online. Oh my gosh. So she's been in the open adoption game for 7 years, I think. And I'm almost 18 years in. So we met in different ends of this spectrum of navigating open adoption. And so I was one of the first that she found, and she's been huge in advocacy and law reform. And we met and started talking, and she's like the most amazing person. She's really the better half of the Twisted Sisterhood podcast. But we came together just talking about how there wasn't podcasts for birth moms to just talk to other birth moms about the crap that we're going through. And we have all these podcasts hosted by adoptees and adoptive parents, and all of this education matters, but rarely are birth moms just speaking to birth moms through a podcast form. And so we decided, like, let's do it. Let's have these conversations that we get to just be who we are, unfiltered, and just kind of share what we're going through as birth moms. And so from two different, kind of ends of the spectrum of generational modern adoption came together. And, our first logos were like the barbed wire, and it was like, we feel like that's the boundaries, right? People want to like put a line in something and draw a line in the sand and set boundaries, and we felt like it had barbed wire on it. Like, so we came in kind of hot, and it's been amazing education. But what we thought would just be a podcast for birth moms obviously turned into podcast that has been really helpful for adoptive parents, because they got to be a fly on the wall a little bit to hear conversations that birth moms were having with each other, and adoption professionals to be able to use to help educate adoptive parents. It's been really powerful, but we really thought we were just going to come in and kind of be really offensive and light things on fire, but it's really turned into a really amazing educational space for us. And we feel like we're kind of the outcast. The Twisted Sisterhood really just kind of felt like our existence in this turmoil and constant like readjusting and re-navigating like who we are as birth moms and what our identity is in this space just really felt like that fit who we were. And we were just like, if they don't give you a seat, like bring a folding chair, bring your own seat, and come to the table. Yeah.
Well, can I just say how cool that is that you have adoptive parents and other people listen to that? Because when Mal and I are on the birth mom vacation, we often say, oh my gosh, I wish everybody could see what is happening with these women and just how normal that they're just women. We're all together. Like, I want people to see this, and for them to be able to hear your conversations and gain that perspective as well. It is like such a huge piece in like breaking down those walls between this, that is so cool that you have them coming and listening to.
I've had the opportunity to come to your event, and you see these birth moms at their tables sitting there talking to each other. And I'm like, how many people would just give anything to be able to just hear and understand and know these women, and they're amazing women to know.
Yes. And I would say I love the fact that you even say in your description on your podcast, you can find them on probably like us, any platform that you stream on, Apple Podcasts. I stream a lot on Spotify, but in your description, it says a podcast for birth moms by birth moms. And I think that going into it with that intent is what allows you to speak so freely. Like, maybe you weren't initially thinking, oh, this is just going to like burn down the adoption, because you're just being open about your experience and knowing that the people on the other side that are the intended audience most likely feel the same way. Yet when you get those outside perspective in and you realize, oh, wow, we are talking to a much larger audience than just the birth moms. But I feel like you need to continue to talk to each other through that filter of like, we're only speaking to birth moms, because that's how we become the fly on the wall. Then you're not catering your conversations towards us. You're still allowing us to just be the fly on the wall to something really real and really raw. Because I can tell you too, at that event, feedback that we got, because our guest of honor table that we had at our Funding Love Gala, we sat you guys together. We sat birth moms that we had hosted on Funding Love Vacations along with families that we have hosted on Funding Love Vacations. And that was feedback that we got from both of our Funding Love families was, wow, I had no idea how incredibly impactful it was going to be to sit across the table from a birth mom. I don't think that either of those adoptions have open adoptions, because one is international and one is a foster care adoption. But being able to even like in that mindset, you might just think, well, it's not needed. I'm shut off to that conversation because it doesn't apply to me, but it still opens your eyes. Even if that's not something they're able to do, it opens their eyes to be able to advocate for something that other families in their community need to be aware of.
Yeah.
And I think it's super important. So I absolutely love that. And I love the name of Twisted Sisterhood. Because for me, I feel like it's so dynamic. And like you were saying, like it feels like you're on this other side of like a line of barbed wire. But for me too, it has to feel so twisted. And this is just me coming from like an intuitive place, not something from experience. But it must feel so twisted to like come to another woman that you would have nothing in common with and be like, in other life situations, we wouldn't connect at all. And yet we connect so deeply, but yet it's over something painful. Like how twisted it's over loss and it's over grief. And it like, how twisted is that to find community that was built on loss and grief? Like that is the twistedness of this like dark world we live in.
And when you really break it down from start to finish, and I'm, speaking domestic infant adoption, where we're literally picking strangers out of profile books to raise our children. How twisted is that? I mean, you want to talk about the twistedness of this relationship in no other space. Like you said, Mal, like no other space, time, political beliefs, religious beliefs, social economic class would we ever come together. And yet we're bound for life over this child.
Yes.
And we picked you out of a book. And we're doing life together. It's wild. This journey is wild. It's
yeah. Well, I'm curious how you guys came up with the name Twisted Sisterhood, or what it means to you. Because like Mal was explaining, that's kind of her take on that title. But I'm curious what it means to you guys.
I think from a birth mom perspective, Kelsey and I, we've both been on very large stages. We've had the opportunity to speak in a lot of spaces, but our talks are viewed and scripted down, and we're told what we can and can't say on stage. Like those are very common narratives that we see all the time. And I don't think this is talked about enough, because we don't talk about it, because if we talk about it, we don't get speaking gigs. So I might be burning myself to the ground here, but we've all been on stages where we've been told, don't talk about this, don't talk about this, don't talk about this. And so they definitely want to use, cater, adjust our narrative for their audience. And I get that. That makes sense. But at the same time, we are the social outcasts in this. We are the bottom of the barrel in this. And so, and we know it, we're aware of it. We have been shown that and proved that over and over and over. And so we are the twisted sister. We are the outcast of the community. And that's not, we're not trying to shame other people, but that is just the reality of what we face all the time. And I don't think, because there's so few birth moms that on a social platform are talking about these kinds of things, people don't see that or understand that. But people don't understand that when I go and speak on a stage of 3,000 people, my talk has been edited down to the T of what is acceptable and what's not. And that makes us the outcasts. We are the Twisted Sisterhood. And so if you're a birth mom, you can come sit with us, but I can promise you, you're not going to be a crowd favorite. Like, so that's kind of where we're at. That's where we're at.
Wow. Honestly, I had no idea. I didn't know that people would like nitpick your talks in that sort of way.
Yep. It's very catered. The realities of my lived experience get cut down, edited, scripted to make sure that we share the right message. And Kelsey and I, we've been in this long enough to be able to pick and choose where we'll show up and where we won't. However, we still feel a heavy responsibility to speak on behalf of ourselves and other birth moms. And so if we get a stage of 3,000 people, do we go and let them trim our message just so that people at least know we exist? I don't know. It's a very, we're in this really complicated space of, and so I think what you were talking about, Mal, with the podcast, that is the truest statement, is that it allows us to literally be able to speak our truth, where on so many stages, platforms, education spaces, we are silenced and trimmed down all the time.
For
and
sure.
the podcast is a space that we don't have to do that.
Yeah, you can just let free.
Yep.
Let free, be yourself.
Yep. And love us or hate us, this is us being able to actually speak our truth, where we're censored in so many other spaces.
Right. Yes. Well, more power to you. We give you your voice here, girl.
Yes, girl.
I mean, you have to deal with the consequence of having us on and speaking for you. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, that's okay.
Hey, listen, we welcome it. We invited you, so that's it.
That's right. So we can definitely see that the adoption community as a whole, but especially the birth mom community, is that twisted community that you're talking about, can just be really strange. And we've seen it on our birth mom vacations, like I was saying before, where women from all walks of life come together and they're like, we wouldn't have anything in common except for this. And yet that ties us together so deeply. And, anyways, but however, we also feel like being adoptive families and being adoptive moms, Kate and I, seeking community with all corners of the triad, it kind of feels a little bit of that twisted way as well. We know that birth moms, or society, see birth moms and adoptive families as like opposing sides, and that building relationships can feel really tricky or sticky or twisted, shall we say, and like, we even get questioned for why we advocate so strongly for birth parents, but we just feel like it is so important. I know it is something that is so strong on Caitlin and I's heart. Like, we know that we don't understand you on a way that another birth mom does, but that doesn't mean that we can't try to understand and educate ourselves on your side of the narrative. So how important do you find it for the adoption community to listen and learn and even build relationships, even if it's not like your own child's birth family, like even online? Like, how important is it for you to kind of seek out building those relationships, listening and learning to the other angles of the triad?
I think that's a really complicated question, and to try and simplify it, I think that it really comes down to just the basic, and lowest hanging fruit. We're talking about education, that if you're going to build forever families and promote the building of families, that we have to acknowledge that we're separating families. And if you can't acknowledge that to get to these forever families, that we broke families first, then we're missing a whole conversation that matters so deeply. And it matters to the women that gave birth to these children, and it matters to the kids that were separated. And if you can't even acknowledge that that part exists, and all we're doing is focusing on the celebration of the forever family that's built, then we're missing it. I mean, I talk about this all the time, coming out of the, hallway at the hospital, the grief and loss on one end and the hope and healing on the other. If we can't meet in the middle and understand that this is both and, then what are we even doing? Like, why are we even talking about adoption, like, at all? Because if you can't understand how those children got to those homes to begin with, then we've missed a whole part of the conversation that is going to matter so deeply. And at the end of the day, the little babies or the young kids that we bring into our homes and adopt grow up, and they have very strong thoughts and feelings about their existence, and how we handle that, how we've honored that, or how, even in the negative, how we've rejected that and denied that, then you're going to have to answer to that. And birth parents have to answer that too. But that's the whole piece. If we can't understand how we got here and what had to happen for these things to take place, then we aren't even having the right conversation.
Yeah, you have to start there. For there to be community and relationship, you have to go down to why we're even here. And that is so true. We're here because there was loss and brokenness. And yes, there's joy on the other side of that, but that exists because of the prior. So yes, you're right. And so to build that community, you have to understand the foundation of why we're here.
And when you look at communities, you can tell the difference between people who have denied and rejected the fact that this existed, happened, or those that want to embrace it and honor it and support it. And so finding community matters, but if you're finding community that is blind to the realities, are we actually supporting each other in community? I mean, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that if we just have a bunch of yes people around us that aren't challenging our beliefs and bringing awareness to things, that we don't actually have community that actually wants us to be better and dig deeper into the heart of what this means.
I feel like it's a bit of a learning curve depending on where you are in the adoption community, in the journey, when you've jumped into the scene, because I've said this a lot recently, but like if I would have gone back to myself when I first started the adoption journey, I would be kind of mortified by the way that I thought, just ignorantly, and the way that I communicated. And so, but to now, to like, gosh, I wish my eyes could have been open then, but it is a learning curve, and it's about jumping in and sometimes maybe saying the wrong thing, or it really is. So I think it's kind of like that. We all need to understand where it starts, but there's also got to be kind of some grace and like some welcoming into the community so we can all learn from the sides, because, and I want to say there are some people who may, this is kind of a blanket statement, but I do feel like most people don't want to offend and hurt. Most people. I do think there are some people who have a complex that's different, but I think most people don't. And so coming together in community to have that, like, listen, let's all learn. And I think that's why these conversations are so important, because like, okay, we have birth moms and adoptive moms on this call. 20, 50, 70 years ago, we probably wouldn't be able to have this conversation. I wouldn't know that you were a birth mom. You would know that I'm an adoptive mom, first of all, and we shouldn't be able to have this conversation, let alone like a friendship. Right. And so I just feel like that in itself, just play on your words, is a twisted sisterhood too.
Yeah. I think
you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting because, I mean, even if you look at my journey here, 15 years in advocacy and education, which is probably way too long for me to be in this space. But we talk a lot about, are you coming to the table as a caterpillar? Or are you coming to a butterfly? And if you're in a space of education, you have to be able to cater your education to those that might be a caterpillar still, that are still crawling and learning and easing into this. Or if we already come into our caterpillar phase, we've learned a lot, but you're never done learning. But I think that this, and I've experienced this, and I've learned over social media. Look, I can't even tell you over 15 years how many people, countless people, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have come into my DMs that have left me and come back because they weren't ready to hear the truths that I shared, and then came back and that said, look, I left, the stuff that you were saying offended me, hurt me, but I'm back because now I'm in the throes of it and I'm understanding more things. But if there's grace for that, we don't learn. We don't grow. And we have seen social media accounts that have just shamed, abused, and beat up people that are genuinely just trying to learn and absorb information. And you know what? I'm not great at it, but I really do. And Kelsey and I have a heart for helping adoptive parents be better and learn who we are, but also fire up birth moms to care about their health and well-being. And like, we call out our own equally as much as we call out adoptive parents. So in this space, there's not enough grace on social. It's terrifying to come and just get the crap kicked out of you all the time online.
So true.
And
so true.
And all we've done is shut people off from learning and growing and evolving and becoming. And I don't think that that's not effective. And all we do at the end of the day is harm the adoptees, which this was supposed to be about to begin with. And so what are we doing? What are we doing when we shame people for trying to learn and saying that, like, come on, like we gotta give some grace for people that are at least willing to show up, because most people have just completely shut down.
Correct. Yeah. And that's what we said when we started this podcast. Honestly, it was terrifying. We're like, we are no way experts. And yet when you start a podcast, and I know you probably feel this way with Twisted Sisterhood, when you start a podcast, it's like people are kind of assuming that you're an expert because you're going to come on here and talk about it publicly. When really it was like, no, we are going to mess up. We are going to say the wrong things. We might offend somebody and have to apologize and say, listen, I worded that wrong, or my heart was in a weird place and I needed to like reevaluate what I was saying and what I was feeling. But if you're not willing to jump in and get messy and do the hard work, then you're never actually going to grow. Like,
one of the good things about being a birth mom is no one actually has that many expectations. So if you screw it up, it's like they've already expected this. We actually have a lot of people that are like, well, of course they said that because they're birth moms, so it's fine. We actually don't have that kind of pressure. But I definitely, as a reminder to everyone that's showing up into these spaces of education, we are living this every single day. Adopted parents, adoptees, birth parents. This isn't a one-off thing that happened at the hospital. We are actually, and those of us that care about open adoption or are trying to pursue that and have those kinds of relationships, we're living this every single day. And we're triggered and have these events that knock us down every single day. And so our mindset and our ability to function in everyday life might come out in a stupid comment, but it's because we're living this every single day. And so when people come to the table, they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you said that. It's so offensive. I'm like, but every single day I wake up and I'm a birth mom to Derek in an open adoption relationship, and we're in the throes of it every day. So if we have a situation going and I'm still trying to stuff's going to come out. We're going to screw it up. We're going to screw it up.
For sure. For sure. So I just would love to hear your perspective now, having been an advocating voice in this for 15 years, like you said. How has your view of adoptive families like shifted and changed? Like, have you gone through seasons of like being offended and then being open and then being rejected and then being close? Like, have you had that kind of like ebb and flow with your own personal like relationship? Not with like Derek's, mind you, but just like adoptive families as a whole.
Yeah, I think we have absolutely seen a consistent collaboration of adoptive parents that want to do this well. Absolutely. I think the education has increased. I think there's more education that ever existed. And I know you guys when you first came to the table into adoption perspectives, how much has education changed for you? Like astronomical amounts of education have been provided. We have platforms where adoptees are speaking out that have never spoke out before. You have classes, you have webinars, you have books, you have all of this education that didn't exist. I know it didn't exist for me in 2006 when I placed. So I know that we've increased in education. I think, and maybe unfairly, we want adoptive parents to care more than maybe they're capable of caring. Maybe more than we want. We want them to care more. And not just adoptive, we want humans, society in general, to care more about us than we see is happening. So do I think there's a movement? Do I think there's adoptive parents that are more educated? Do I think that there's those that are coming back to the table that left the table because they weren't able to hear it? Yes. Do I think all of those things are happening? Of course I do. Do I think laws are changing? Of course I do. Do I think there's adoption professionals that are doing this better? Of course I do. But I think we have a little bit, when you look online, you follow your specific people, and I think we're in a little bit of an echo chamber where we're all sharing the same message. We all actually care about the issues, and so we are surrounded by people that care about the issues. But I think if you step outside of that, from a birth mother lens, if you step outside of the echo chamber of the adoptive parents that you know, and the birth parents that you know, and the adoptive parents or the adoptees that you know that are all educating the same thing, if you step out of that, the number is astronomical of the people that still don't get it and still don't care enough.
Wow. You know what? That's a good point. Because we often do find ourselves in the same circles of having conversations with the same people who believe and are passionate in the same way that we are. So then to step outside and actually have a different lens to see that there's still a lot of work to be done is kind of good, though. It's kind of motivating and motivating, not good that it exists, but good that it's a motivator that, listen, we still got to be having these conversations. And
big picture, have we gotten that far? Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Right.
I
think
in
it's
our
gonna
circles, are we educating each other and holding each other accountable? Absolutely. I think that's true.
Sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to require some creativity, to be honest, to break outside the walls of the adoption triad. I think it's really simple to stay inside of the spaces we've already reached, and you really have to get creative of how do you reach the people outside of that feel like there's not a place for them, there's not a space for them, there's not a need for them. Yeah. What's the point?
Yeah, and how do you draw people in outside the adoption community into these conversations? You know, you got to there's got to be a personal,
to make people
an emotional connection for them, for them to listen.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing, to have a big societal change or a big cultural change, like you're saying, big picture. But you know, like at Funding Love, we do believe that we are genuinely better together.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same? And what is something good that you've seen happen when adopted families and birth moms and adoptees come together in community?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of the industry and people's lived experience and stuff want to keep us in our own corners, but don't understand that we create more change when we come together, when we can get on calls, when we can brainstorm the issues, when we can talk about lived experience, all the nuances, to be able to unpack those and make a plan moving forward to make sure these things don't happen again. If we don't talk to each other, how do you expect change to happen? We can all be mad at each other, and we all have legitimate reasons to be mad at each other, right? But if we don't come together and talk to each other, how does anything get different? It doesn't. And I've said this for a long time. I believe fully that adoptive parents have the power to make the change. They have the power in the dynamic. They have the power in their influence. They have the power financially. They have the power with their outreach. And if adopted parents were willing, and this is if adopted parents were willing to say that they were part of the problem, then they could also admit that they can be a part of the solution. And adopted parents are the ones with the power to make the change. And so for me, serving adopted parents is the only way that I feel like we can be seen and get stuff done. I really do. And I know that that's a lot on the adopted parents. And I understand that they're all coming to the table with very hard nuances of loving birth parents. But at the end of the day, they played a role too. And if adopted parents can admit that they were also a part of the problem, man, how much could they be a part of the solution too?
No, that is so true.
Yes.
That is,
because I can't, as a birth parent, what I've been able to do in 15 years is not the norm for birth parents. And I'm put up on these platforms and I'm allowed to speak in spaces and I'm willing to share my lived experience for education. But I am not the norm in this country for birth parent voices. I need adoptive parents to care. I need adoptive parents to show up. I need adoptive parents to be able to just humble themselves enough to say, yeah, we played a role in the harm that was caused. But man, how can we turn that around and fix it? But that means they have to admit that in all of their own selfish desires and all of the things of getting a child also created harm. And that is a big ask. And adoptive parents just we're not there yet.
And it's also just a whole shift in the way we had this conversation recently of just like the way the culture views the sides as opposing sides as heroes versus villains.
Yeah.
So as long as that's going to exist, it's like you got to just you got to smash that to pieces, and then I just feel like the world will be able to see that we're all in the same team.
But if you're
and so
be the savior,
it's just
like, be the freaking, at least step up and be the savior, because I mean, if you're already labeled that, like, please do it. Like, we would love to see it in the aftermath.
Right. I mean,
well, yeah, a savior in a different way. It's a savior in a different way, because the way that the savior complex is played out now, it's like, oh, they've saved this poor child from harm, which really is not like, but the savior complex. Right. Let's do it the other way. Right.
Yeah. Which leads me, you just posted something on Instagram recently that I messaged you, and I was like, I have so many words, but I'm not going to like type them all out on Instagram. But you posted basically about like the backlash you get for supporting birth moms, because then people are like, well, you're perpetuating the problem by providing support. And we have gotten that countless times too, about how we're perpetuating. And I'm like, we are post-placement care. We are not paying for people's adoptions. We are not even stepping foot in that ground. We are just saying we are acknowledging that this exists. And because it exists, we want to step in and fill gaps and holes that we not only have seen, but we have experienced. And it's just so crazy how hard that is to wrestle with, of like, no, I don't want to perpetuate the problem by saying, and by saying that I'm going to step in and support those that have already gone through it. Yet if we stop supporting those who have already gone through it, you're leaving them out to dry. And until we can fully solve the problem on the front end, people still have to be supporting the people on the back end. I'm sorry, because it's continuing, it's happening, and we can do all we can in advocating through platforms like this of education and so, all of that. But, we can't leave those that have already gone through to the other side out to dry.
Yeah, I think it's really tough. Kelsey and I get this all the time. And as birth moms, it's even more painful when we have women from our own side that have experienced that grief and loss and trauma of being a birth mom through horrific practices of adoption professionals that feel betrayed by their own side. I mean, it's so heavy for Kelsey and I, but also at the end of the day, I have tens of thousands of birth moms that, regardless of how they got here, are in grief and trauma because of the loss of their kids. And I'm just not in a space where I'm just going to abandon them. Yeah. I'm not in the business of talking to pregnant women. I don't go into pregnancy centers. I don't go into individual conversations with agencies to advocate one way or the other. I've never stepped into those spaces. I think it's unethically wrong. I don't support that. But what I know without a doubt, that if a woman has her rights terminated, she's going to need grief and trauma support. And who's going to offer it? And if we can't come in to support our own because we've been through it, then what are we even doing? And again, if you aren't going to address, everyone wants to blame the adoption industry. And I promise you, if you've been following me or know me in any level, you know that I call out the adoption industry all of the time. But if you are not willing to address housing, addiction, homelessness, prostitution, all of these governmental issues, systemic issues, adoption that's just a result. And yes, do they take advantage of those systemic issues? Of course they do. Of course they do. But did adoption happen on its own? No, we had a lot of help getting there. And at the end of the day, unless you're willing to address and unpack all of the other issues that these women are facing, relinquishment is going to happen. It's going to happen. There's women that want it, and there's women that don't see any other choice. And at the end of the day, if they find themselves in that space, I'm going to offer and fight to make sure that they have free support. Period. Full stop. I don't care.
Yes. Preach it.
That's it. Preach it, girl. Yeah. I mean, Enough said there. That's amazing. Yeah.
So before we wrap up here, though, I do want to mention a resource that is coming out here soon that I have already pre-ordered. I'm waiting for it to come. And it is a book that is called Adoption Unfiltered. It's revelations from adoptees, birth parents, adoptive parents, and allies. And your co-host, Kelsey, had a part in that. Why don't you share with that? Yeah. Share with us a little bit about that.
So this book models the importance of adults in adoption, working together in the spirit of curiosity and empathy to learn and do better for future generations. We have had the education in the baby scoop era. We know what we did wrong in adoption. What does modern adoption education look like? And this book unpacks where we're at now with birth mom, adoptee, adoptive mom coming together with 50 other people that were collaborations to bring this information. It's research-based, it's personal testimonies, it's lived experience of over 50 contributors, plus the authors that are so well-versed, and Kelsey's the birth mom author in this. But this book is coming out as a way to bring like what we learned from like the girls who went away into modern adoption. And it's so powerful. And so many birth moms, adoptees, and adoptive parents that I know and trust and respect are in this book. So you can pre-order this book currently on Amazon, adoptionunfiltered.com. You can go to their website, but they're also doing a bunch of book launch tours. They're starting in the West. So they're going to be in Seattle, Portland, Denver, through National Adoption Awareness Month through November. I'll be in Seattle for their book launch, reading some of my experts. I was one of the contributors to the book. This book matters so much because I think there's so much of us that believe that I understand that we did things really crappy through the baby scoop era. I get it. But we're better now, so it's fine. Right? At least we're not like that, right? So we're better. But this book continues to portray the harm, the trauma, the loss that still exists. Even though we're better than that, we're still missing so many pieces. And this book will absolutely light that up.
No, I can't wait. Yeah. I can't wait. Yeah. Yeah. That's going to be good. I'm going to pre-order that right now.
Yes.
Yeah. I actually got my phone out. I'm doing it as we speak. Yes.
And if you're listening, pre-order too. So remind me of the actual release date and the tour date?
December 1st, it's coming out. And then they'll be touring.
Soon.
Yeah, it's coming out. Right. And obviously, if you're listening to this through Thanksgiving, we've already done a couple of events and they're going to continue to tour through 2024. Perfect. And you can go to adoptionunfiltered.com to look for book tour dates and meetups.
Love it.
Awesome.
Love it. I can't wait. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope everybody listening honestly buys that because that is exactly how we're going to make some movement, just like we've been talking about this whole episode. Yes. So listen, before we close, since it is Thanksgiving week, we're curious, just share with us something you're thankful for.
Oh my gosh, my friends, in the season that I'm in right now, I'm most thankful for my husband and my kids. We've been in the throes of so much in our own adoption constellation, so much in turmoil in what we're seeing in the world that's happening, the violence and just the harm, and also just in adoption. This is hard work and it's our own lived experience, but we're also watching so much harm to our fellow man. And I'm just grateful, honestly. And I know how privileged I am to have 4 walls around my home that I get to protect my husband and my kids, and we get to snuggle up and be in this holiday season. And man, how blessed am I that we get to snuggle up and be safe. And that is such a gift. Such a gift.
Gosh.
Oh my gosh.
That is so true.
So much to be thankful for. Yes. I mean, it is, gosh, the holiday season, you do reflect on that a lot more with everything that's going on. It's like, let's just hold this close and
to protect
look what's
it
around
and
us.
keep
So I love
it
that.
safe. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. Gosh, well, we have loved this time with you and this conversation as we always do. And, before we started recording, we were all sitting here talking about what floral dress we're going to have for the garden gala. So if you're going to join us at the garden gala, find your floral dress. But, Ashley, we're so grateful for you and these conversations and all the work that you're doing and the support that you have for us at Funding Love. It's really it means so much to us that we can link arms and do this together. So we're always on your side and we know we have your support. So we love you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yes. And listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Funding Love Podcast. We'll see y'all next week.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Funding Love Podcast. We hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving, and we hope that you know how thankful we are for you. Everything that we do at Funding Love would not be possible without the community of supporters and donors that link arms with us to serve adoptive families, birth moms, and adoptees alike. We have a huge giving campaign coming up for Giving Tuesday. We would love to raise $40,000 in one day. If you would like to join in and help us to reach our goal, visit fundinglove.com/Giving Tuesday to learn more. All contributions are greatly appreciated and are 100% tax deductible. So if you are looking for a place to do some end-of-year giving, supporting our Giving Tuesday campaign could be the perfect opportunity for you. When you partner with us, you are funding love.